Good evening, and welcome to the keynote event for Maryland Jewish Advocacy Day 2022. My name is Ron Halber, and I am the Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. Joining me tonight to open our program are Mark Terrell, President of the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore, and Joel Frankel, Executive Director of the Jewish Federation of Howard County. On behalf of the Baltimore Jewish Council, the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore, the JCRC of Greater Washington, the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington, the Jewish Federation of Howard County, and the JCRC of Howard County, we want to welcome the hundreds of people who have joined us here tonight. As we continue our collective fight against the pandemic, we gather tonight in virtual format for the second year in a row. We are grateful to all of you who have joined us, representatives of Governor Hogan's administration, members of the General Assembly, elected officials from our local jurisdictions, and most importantly, the hundreds of community members who are here to engage in advocacy. We also want to thank the lay leaders and professional staffs from our three communities, representing our federations and our many agencies that do so much critical work each and every day. A special thanks to the chairs of our federations, Beth Goldsmith of the Associated, Sam Kaplan of the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington, and Rachel Simon of the Jewish Federation of Howard County. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. And I am Mark Terrell, the president of the Associated Jewish Community Federation of Baltimore. And it is my pleasure to see all the elected officials who are with us tonight and everybody participating. Your presence is a clear demonstration of the work and the support that we do together on behalf of the people and the citizens of Maryland. The agencies of the Jewish Federations of Maryland are involved in a number of different activities throughout an array of services in multiple agencies, and much of that work is conducted with the help of the state. We feed the poor, we care for the elderly, provide medical and disability help and mental health services to all races, ethnicities, and religions. We also work on something that's very troubling to the Jewish community right now, as you all know, which is the security of our institutions. It has become a big issue, and your sensitivity to that issue has been something that has been very heartwarming and important to us. I want to thank the Hogan administration and the General Assembly for supporting many of our initiatives, things like aging in place programs, funding for the care of aging Holocaust survivors, initiatives for the security of our schools and our houses of worship, and of course, the Maryland Israel Development Center that has been a marquee program that has developed many jobs and brought companies from Israel to the state of Maryland. I also want to thank the lawmakers for your support of capital budget projects for our communities that make a real difference in our work. This includes the Pearlstone Center, the Bender JCC, the Hebrew Homes, the Associated Park Heights campus, and many other projects that we have been discussing over the years. In sum, our partnership is enduring and is important. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with us this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Ron. Tonight's keynote program is only one part of our reimagined Maryland Jewish Advocacy Day effort. In addition to this evening's webinar program, we have also scheduled multiple evenings of virtual lobbying with lawmakers who represent the districts of our individual communities. Many of you joined us last week for our first evening of virtual community lobbying, and we have many more nights to come. We want to thank all of the members of the House, delegates, and Senate who are taking the time to meet with our constituents and hear about our priority budget and legislative issues. As a newcomer to the Maryland Jewish community who moved here in July from Missouri, I'm impressed by the positive relationships that the Jewish community has developed with our elected representatives. Next year, let's hope that we can resume making the trip to Annapolis and engage in face-to-face conversations. Let me now turn the program over to the board president of the Baltimore Jewish Council, Rabbi Andrew Bush, who will introduce our first featured speaker for this evening.
Good evening. It is wonderful to be here and to be welcoming you at this moment. And as Joel just said, and we welcome him to town, we do look forward to the future where this can happen fully in person with all of us together, and not just the way we are right now. As we are, we hope that everyone will figure out a way to participate. I am just buying us a little time. We always want to be respectful, especially during session, that it takes a little time for some of our speakers to get to us. As those of us who have gathered in Annapolis know, that can take time when we are actually physically in the Capitol, and therefore it can take time now as well in terms of it. And so we're hope that we all are doing well. We have some warm weather coming our way. And I'm just glad that our various constituencies and 3 federations or more, and both the JCRC and the Baltimore Jewish Council, are able to gather together to be able to participate in these advocacy days. We really should change it to plural in terms of this. So we are actually going to switch the order, I believe, at the moment in terms of how we are managing this today. And I am going to confess at this moment that I'm going to hand this over, because we're going to switch the orders of our speakers here. And I appreciate all of that in terms of understanding at that moment. And so let me welcome the person who will soon be the JCRC president, Thorn Posen. Thorn, let me hand this over to you and allow you to introduce our next speaker, and then we'll come back around when we have our originally scheduled speaker. Thank you.
No problem, Rabbi. I'm happy to step in. My name is Thorn Posen, and I am in fact the vice president of the JCRC of Greater Washington. And I'm pleased to be able to be here this evening and introduce what will be, I guess, our first speaker. All of us are aware of the urgent challenges that we're facing today with anti-Semitism, hate, threats to our faith institutions. And as a community, we are grateful for the partnerships we have with our federal, state, and local law enforcement partners. So our first speaker is a key figure in that partnership. Erek Barron serves as the Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer in Maryland, an accomplished attorney who early in his career served as a prosecutor in both Prince George's County and in Baltimore City. Mr. Barron was nominated last year by President Biden to be U.S. Attorney for Maryland. His nomination was approved by the U.S. Senate, and Mr. Barron was sworn into office this past October. He's also no stranger to Annapolis. When he was nominated by President Biden, in fact, he was in the midst of his second term in the Maryland House of Delegates. So we thank Mr. Barron for joining us tonight to talk about the work of his office and the U.S. Department of Justice, including their efforts in our collective battle against hate. Mr. Barron.
Hi, everyone. I am not Mr. Barron, as you can see. I am at his office, and I am worried that I am taking his video. My name is Sarah Marquardt. I'm an assistant United States attorney at the Department of Justice, and I serve as the civil rights coordinator. So I apologize. It says on my screen, Erek Barron. So let me email him, and I'm going to log off and make sure I'm not taking his spot on this video. So I know he appreciates that kind introduction. I hope he didn't miss it. I will log off and hopefully be back on with our U.S. attorney. So give me one moment, please.
So we appreciate that going on. Let me invite Ron Halber and Howard Libet to turn their video and their camera on. And let's talk a little about the work we do and the cooperation of our JCRC and our BJC together, gentlemen. If you want to give some insight to the work that we do together and things we're talking about as we await our speakers, please.
Yeah, sure. That would be lovely. Thank you, Rabbi. I mean, one of the things that I think we are so privileged to have here in Maryland, and I think my colleagues and Howard and my colleague Howard meaning Howard County and Howard Lippett in Baltimore can agree, is that we have a wonderful partnership that exists, and we work together on legislative matters throughout the year in Maryland, whether it be social and public policy or whether it be advocating for each other's financial goals. And I think that's one of the reasons why we as a state have been so successful, because in other areas around the country, frankly, there's not that sense of community and that sense of unity that exists throughout. And it's always been a pleasure, whether it's dealing with interfaith work or whether it's dealing with security or whether it's dealing with some of the most pressing issues of our day. The friendship and the relationship between our two communities, I think, is a major reason why we are viewed as united in the halls of Annapolis, and why our relationships with our elected officials and other community leaders are so solid. Howard?
I also think what's really an important part of our collective work that our relationships extend beyond our Jewish communities to deep partnerships with the other faith communities in Maryland, whether it's the Catholic communities or Muslim communities, when we're talking about issues involving hate or that kind of thing. It is really a, we stand with a lot of different groups. I will also note that, we're founding members of coalitions to help fight poverty in the state. And that's been just a huge part of our work and our collective commitment to remember we're not just about the Jewish community, but we're about all the vulnerable citizens of Maryland. And so I work with seniors, with domestic violence victims, with working families and areas like healthcare that aren't just Jewish issues, but are issues that we all care about in our efforts to push for social justice are really important.
Yeah, I think you're right, Art. I think that has a great deal to do with our success, because it's one thing when we walk in as members of the Jewish community, obviously we care about our institutions, we care about our agencies, we care about things, but we're also part of a greater society. And as we know, that one of our Jewish commandment, one of our Jewish values that we face, that we cannot separate ourselves from the community, and we must be part of it. We must engage. And especially during these times, the interfaith work that we're doing, I find extremely important. As we saw in Montgomery County, for example, and in Maryland, we've been spending a lot of time working on the issue of security. And our own county council actually became the first local jurisdiction in the United States to announce that it was going to make security grants available. So we're very lucky in Maryland, because there is, not only are we eligible for the National Security Grant Program, which is a federal program mostly for capital, and there are 3 other state grant programs which the BJC and the JCRC and Howard County were actually instrumental in creating. But this creates a source of revenue for capital needs. One of the things that I'm hoping that we're going to see is, after what happened in Texas, is that the National Security Grant Program on the federal level is there's an attempt being made now by JFNA and its partners like the Orthodox Union and others and Agudath to try and double that pot of money for $360 million. And I think it's gaining traction in Congress. And I think that will allow, that's very important, because as new technologies develop, and first of all, new technologies development, equipment becomes old and has to be replaced. And so and plus, believe it or not, even after the NGSP being around for approximately 2 decades, there's still boatloads of synagogues and Jewish institutions that have never taken advantage of the program to harden their facilities to deter from terrorism or from or from hate crime. So one of the things that we're hoping is that Montgomery County's program will be mimicked around the country, and that it will start, because right now our agencies were provided, we had 44 agencies that were provided $500,000 to provide security to help pay for police officers. Also, and another thing that I think that is interesting is that we have found ourselves, even with constant tension in the Middle East, we have found that during this climate of polarization in American society, that our relationship with the Muslim community has increased. Oh, I guess I can stop. We have our
we could that. I'm now going to turn things back over to Rabbi Bush to introduce our Senate President.
Excellent work, Ron and Howard. Thank you very much. And Senator Ferguson, we understand how busy you are, so thank you very much for joining us. I am Rabbi Andy Bush, president of the Baltimore Jewish Council, and good to see you again. Let me just make sure everyone knows where we are, and then I'm going to hand it right off to you, so we appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
Tonight's first speaker is a longtime friend of our Jewish communities, which we were just hearing about, and can also be described as a passionate advocate for Baltimore and for all of Maryland. Senator Bill Ferguson won his seat in the Maryland Senate in 2010, representing a district of South and Southeast Baltimore that includes the Jewish Museum of Maryland and downtown Baltimore's Holocaust Memorial. He quickly established himself here in Annapolis as a leader on education and budget issues, and was elected, as we know, president of the Senate at the beginning of the 2020 session. He has guided the Senate through such challenges as this pandemic crisis and the passage of the powerful Kerwin education plan. On a personal note, I have a special affinity for President Ferguson's early work in education. Like my daughter, he served in Teach for America in Baltimore City Public Schools. And so we are honored and thankful that he is joining us here tonight to share his vision for Maryland and agenda for this year's legislative session. Senator Ferguson, let me hand it over to you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Rabbi Bush. That is a very kind introduction, and it's such an honor to partner with you, with the Baltimore Jewish Council and the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. It is such a pleasure, and my district is such an incredible place, and we have such a growing Jewish population that it is truly an honor to be here this evening and work in partnership with you on all of the many issues that have been a part of your advocacy agenda for many years. I can't thank you enough for how passionate the Jewish community has been to help make Maryland a state that is more equitable and more just year after year. It's an obvious commitment to Tikkun Olam and repairing the world, and it's just evident in each of the policies, particularly this year. I know that there's an enormous focus on ensuring that there's parity and legal representation in cases that are eviction proceedings, the expansion of temporary protective orders to protect the most vulnerable amongst us, and also the Time to Care Act, which of course is an issue that I personally care a great deal about. And throughout all of this, the Jewish community has been on the front end, making sure that we are focusing on policies that will benefit and support the most vulnerable amongst us in our society. And it truly matters. And so I am proud to be a friend of the Jewish community and look forward to our ongoing work this session and then in the years to come. So where are we headed? What should we expect? Hopefully I can give you kind of a general overview and of the many topics that we have on the agenda this year. Hopefully I hit the high notes, and certainly I'm glad to fill in any gaps at the end if there are any questions that may be answered. But I think everyone knows that COVID-19 has been the all-encompassing focus of every part of our work, from operations to the policies to the impact across every sector of our society. COVID continues to be the driving factor. And as we focus in on these next 55 days, our focus will be on how the state's health and economy can recover most effectively, particularly those who were most intensely impacted by the coronavirus experience that we've all shared together in very painful ways in many cases. What I deeply believe is that we are transitioning into a new place where we have got to learn to live with this virus. We are not in a place where we were 2 years ago, where we didn't have vaccines, we didn't have available tests, we didn't have therapeutic treatments. And so as we move forward, the beauty of technology and science really have allowed us to, be in a place where we can learn to live like we have with many other viruses around us. And so as we think about this, there is one driving factor, and that is the health and economic well-being of Marylanders. We have got to help people feel safe as they return back to a more normal life and be able to provide for families who are most in need. When it comes to COVID-19 specifically, the absolute priority has to be keeping kids in our schools. I think the uncertainty that has been created, the lack of stability, the back and forth of in and out, the virtual or not, the sense of fear has been what will be the long tail of COVID. And I see it with my own kids every day who are 7 and 9 years old, trying to navigate a global pandemic and understand what it means in their life. And I see it in their school where there have been different and more challenging experiences among students across the student body in ways that were really unthinkable in years past. And I deeply believe that our priority must be helping children to feel well again so that they can thrive and maximize their potential. There's lots of ways that we can do this, doing paid time off for getting vaccines and boosters, making sure that test kits are readily available, supporting our healthcare workforce. These are all critical ways that we're going to be able to live through this COVID-19 crisis moving forward so that we can move forward in a more normal fashion safely. When it comes to our economy, I think this is a very interesting moment in time because despite being in a global pandemic, we are seeing this unbelievable budget surplus and largely very tight labor markets that you wouldn't expect in the midst of a global pandemic. But we are sitting on a $4.1 billion surplus, of which about $1.3 billion of that $4 billion are structural. That's part of recurring. While that's great and allows us to make some really incredible one-time investments, it's very important to note, because I think a lot of folks have heard about this large surplus, that $3 billion of that surplus is very one-time in nature. So the 1.3 is structural and ongoing, but that $3 billion is unlikely to be with us over and over. And so we have to be very, very fiscally prudent and thoughtful about how we provide financial supports, that we don't create a fiscal crisis, and that we make sure that we are doing what we can to attract the best and most talented workforce here in the state of Maryland. Another related issue that we're taking a lot of time and energy to try and do what we can is really trying to reduce violence and create real safety. Community safety is an essential fundamental function of government. It is absolutely critical. It exists above all else. If people don't feel safe, nothing else matters. And I will say, I deeply believe that the violence that we're seeing across the state of Maryland, and of course, as a representative for Baltimore City, acutely in the city of Baltimore, it is part of the pandemic impact. People have been uncertain and unwell. And as that has happened and as things have reopened, the violence that we've seen, I think it can be directly attributed to what we've all experienced over these last 2 years that's playing out in really unfortunate and horrific ways. If there were a single piece of legislation that we could pass to solve this crisis, we would. The problem is, what I know is that the only way to reduce violence and truly create opportunity that creates real safety is with a clear and coordinated plan that is executed by executive agencies at the local, state, and federal levels. It is essential that our executive agencies who oversee the day-to-day operation of government are working together in a coordinated fashion. We will do what it takes to give them the resources they need and the frameworks to do this work. But it is going to take coordination amongst our executive agencies for us to truly and sustainably deal with the challenge of violence that we've seen. Some of the issues that we will tackle are prohibiting ghost guns, improving parole and probation, engaging in a robust conversation around juvenile justice reform, and really expanding access to behavioral and mental health, which is so lacking in this state, but also across this country. We have a system that is inherently broken. We won't fix it all this year, but we have got to make substantial efforts when it comes to mental health access. It's just too important, has been laid bare for all, how much Maryland has left to go to make sure that people have access to care so that they feel well. When it comes to healthcare in Maryland, our healthcare infrastructure, largely due to those who are unvaccinated or have chosen not to get vaccinated. The infrastructure has been strained in ways that none of us have ever seen before. When you look at the nursing shortages, from the labor shortage within hospitals and long-term care settings, it is simply untenable. And so we are going to put resources behind our healthcare system to make sure that we can retain our great healthcare workers, our healthcare heroes that have been on the front line. But we're going to have to take up some of the policy adjustments to make sure that it is easier to get into the workforce so that we can refill the pipelines of those who have left the profession. Along those lines, what we've seen in the past and is happening again now, the impacts of the strain on our healthcare system are extremely disparate. They are not equally distributed. And so as racial disparities in health outcomes existed pre-pandemic, those disparities have only been exacerbated as our healthcare system has taken on more of this crisis. And so we are laser-like focused on doing the things that we can, like our health enterprise zones, to really have a targeted, intentional effort to reduce these racial disparities that we have seen develop and exacerbate over the last 2 years. Now we get to the slow burning crisis, which is the climate. Our climate is changing in ways that are caused by our human consumption of carbon. There is no doubt about it. It is a scientific fact, and we have an obligation to do what we can to change it. We are but one state in a country that is a part of a larger global ecosystem, but we have the opportunity to be leaders and set a standard around innovation and sustainability that is where we should be as with the assets that we have in this amazing state. And so we are taking up this Climate Solutions Now bill that will set aggressive standards. It will be thoughtful, it will be purposeful, but most importantly, it'll recognize that if we are truly going to deal with the climate crisis, we have to do it in a way that is sustainable for our economic future. And I think that we've spent a lot of time on this climate bill, and we're going to do a lot of work with the House this year to make sure that we set a standard that Marylanders should be proud of by the time we leave, to say that the future of our Earth is essential for future generations, and we have got to be leaders in this space to prove that we can reduce our carbon reliance in a sustainable and thoughtful way. On the various components, our priorities for the Jewish community, we are going to move something forward around access to counsel and eviction proceedings. We came very close last year. I think the key component here is figuring out the sustainable funding source. We're going to be looking towards federal dollars. Senator Hedelman and Chairman Will Smith have been front and center in trying to make sure that we have a long-term means of providing access to counsel, while also recognizing that all of these issues require a balance, and there are interests in landlords, particularly small landlords, that we want to make sure are protected as well. But I do feel very confident that we will get through access to counsel and have a sustainable solution by the end of the session. On the Time to Care Act, paid family leave, one of the proudest bills that I've had was in 2018. I was the lead sponsor for the bill that provided paid family leave for all state workers. It was something of all the bills that I've had a hand in or been able to champion here in the legislature. It is without a doubt the bill that I get the most feedback on from families of who have newborn children and send a message saying that they are just so grateful for the opportunity to spend those early weeks with their children because of legislation that we were able to pass. We have got to move forward with paid family leave. The challenge that we're going to face is that as we're coming out of the pandemic, I think there are very real concerns from small business owners about how they can survive in the midst of all of the uncertainty that they've experienced. And so we are going to have some very, very serious conversations this year to figure out whether we can get a path forward so that we can ensure that paid family leave is something that's available to all Marylanders in a sustainable way, and that does not overly burden businesses such that they have another burden coming out of the pandemic. Last thing that I just want to make sure that I touch on, because it's something that has happened this in this week. The Senate has returned to in-person sessions for our hearings. This was something that from the beginning of the year, my hope at the beginning of the 22 session was that we would be able to function in an in-person format. I am very confident it is the way that the Senate does its best work. These issues are complex and hard, and the senators need the time to work through the intricate details of legislation, which is best done around a table to work through complicating factors and make sure there are not unanticipated impacts. But of course, this is a change from where we had been virtual over the last year and a half. We made that work. It was viable. I'm not sure that it was our best functioning way of doing business. The challenge of having virtual testimony, I think at times doesn't provide for the type of input that is necessary to really dig deep into issues and to have the time and space to really solve complex problems. And so while we are changing and do not have a virtual testimony option available on the whole, one of the key components is that we did build out an electronic written testimony process. This did not exist before the pandemic. And so now any Marylander, no matter where they are, where they live, they don't have to come to Annapolis. They don't have to sit and wait to testify. They can put down their thoughts in a written testimony and it'll be added to the legal bill file that will stick with that bill for perpetuity. And when senators are going to voting sessions and looking at testimony or reminding themselves of testimony about how to work through a bill, it's that written testimony that truly, truly matters. And so that system is up and running through the MyMGA. And we will, it is the most transparent that the Senate has ever been in the history of this institution. We've continued with the live streaming, and I think we're making ongoing reforms to make sure that Marylanders have confidence in their state Senate and their General Assembly. So let me stop there and just say thank you. Thank you for the work that you do, your advocacy, your ongoing impact. It truly, truly matters. We are at a point that many others throughout history and human history don't have the ability to say, that they are recovering from a global pandemic. And as we move forward, it will be our ongoing partnership and the sense of community that has been built through the worry from the pandemic that will be our guiding light moving forward to build the world that I think all of us believe is possible. So thank you for your advocacy. And I deeply appreciate the partnership that we have had and will have in the weeks ahead for session and the years ahead as we work to build a better Maryland. So thank you all.
Well, thank you so much, Senate President Ferguson. On behalf of our communities and jurisdictions, I want to thank you again for joining us tonight. Your leadership and work with our communities makes such a difference every day, and we can't tell you how much we appreciate that. Again, my name is Thorne Posen, and I'm the Vice President of the JCRC of Greater Washington, and it is my pleasure and privilege to introduce our next speaker. I gave a little bit of an intro to him earlier, but to wrap, to briefly repeat some of the highlights there. He's a key figure in the partnership that we in the Jewish community have built in Maryland, and a strong friend of the Jewish community here. Erek Barron is an accomplished attorney who has served as a prosecutor in both Prince George's County and Baltimore City, and has also served as a multi-term member of the House of Delegates. So he was nominated last year by President Biden to be the U.S. Attorney for Maryland, and it is that he was sworn in to office this past October, and it is that capacity that he'll be speaking to us this evening. And we thank you, Mr. Barron, for joining us tonight, and look forward to hearing from you, Mr. Barron.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you all this evening. Again, my name is Erek Barron. I am serving as the United States Attorney for the District of Maryland. Again, I was sworn in last year, October 7th, 2021, and it's been a whirlwind since then. I think that makes me about somewhere a little over 130 or so days in, and during that time, really just been hunkering down with the folks in the office. I'm blessed to have joined a great office of just under 100 attorneys and about 130 or so support staff. all of whom, just like many of you, have been very affected by this pandemic. So I spent a lot of time one-on-one with everyone in the office, making sure people are doing okay personally and professionally as we try to navigate through this pandemic along with our priorities, with the thinking that if I take care of the people and nurture the office, then we can better address our priorities. And so what are those priorities? Well, the Attorney General, who happens to be a Marylander, Merrick Garland, will tell you that we have three co-equal priorities here at the Department of Justice. And that starts with protecting the rule of law. Number two, making sure that the nation is safe, protecting people. And three, protecting and enforcing civil rights. So what does that mean for Maryland? I think first and foremost, among equal priorities for Maryland is violent crime, addressing violent crime in the statewide, but particularly in jurisdictions like Baltimore and Baltimore City in particular. Civil rights as well. The office has stood up a civil rights unit, which I am actively, aggressively looking to grow that practice within the office. Three, white collar crime and fraud, particularly fraud that disproportionately impacts our vulnerable populations, such as the elderly. Public corruption continues to be a hallmark of the office, and where we have people who are violating the public trust, our office stands ready to hold them accountable. So those are some of our top priorities. I'm very excited about where the office is headed. I'm optimistic about our ability to address all of those priorities. Certainly we can't do it alone. Like I said, the office has about just under 100 attorneys. And so we work day in and day out and collaboratively with our state and local partners. We have to do this together, particularly as it relates to violent crime. As we enter 2022, I am, despite our challenges, very optimistic about where we're headed. There are a number of things that we're involved in, specific cases and investigations, but more broadly, our partnerships and resources that we expect to be working with from the state, from the mayor, and I believe, knock on wood, once we finally get out of these continuing resolutions in Congress and actually have a budget, I think that budget will mean a good amount of, a significant amount of additional resources for our office and for our federal partners, and will specifically and disproportionately, hopefully, benefit Baltimore and the Baltimore region. I'm very optimistic about our civil rights practice. Believe one of our lead attorneys, Sarah Marquardt, is on the Zoom, and she is leading our civil rights unit. But we've already done so much with that practice. Civil rights, I think nowadays we think of police misconduct issues, and that is an important aspect of our civil rights practice, but it's a lot more than that, and includes enforcing civil rights laws that have to do with discrimination, whether it be disabilities or discrimination against one's belief or gender, race, ethnicity. We are looking to address civil rights violations broadly, and the unit has put out a letter. I think you all were in receipt of a letter, hopefully, just kind of describing our practice and giving some contact information about when you see something or when there are things out there that you think should be addressed or that you're seeing. We want to hear about it so that we can investigate. Those matters might be criminal. They might be of a more civil and discriminatory nature. It might relate to housing, employment, disability rights. We are and stand ready to address all manner of civil rights violations and including discrimination. We work hand in hand with the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice in Main Justice in DC. I am happy to, as best I can, address any questions that your membership might have. And just, really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. Hopefully we can do some follow-up and talk more specifically about areas of interest to the membership. But, again, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I'm sorry for running late.
No, that's okay. Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Howard Libet. I'm Executive Director of the Baltimore Jewish Council. It's good to see you again.
You too.
Let me jump in with one or two quick questions before we call it an evening, just to ask specifically about, as we think about incidents like what happened in the Hofstra situation in Texas from just a few weeks ago. Are there special concerns you now have been thinking about in terms of faith institutions and kind of the threats that not just Jewish synagogues face, but mosques and other institutions in terms of your work with your civil rights unit or other units?
Well, I think at least some of this is anecdotal, things going on in other parts of the country, but some of it is actually our federal partners, the FBI in particular, has definitely seen a rise in hate crimes, other discriminatory conduct. So we know that there are problems out there. And so what we're doing, we're spending a lot of time with outreach, talking to organizations such as you all, because, people don't necessarily know where to go when things happen and when they have complaints. They don't know who to address them to. And many of these things they take a lot of resources and investigative time that your state's attorney's office or your police department might not be in a position to do. But we have to be careful because we only, we have our resources are limited. We only have but so many bodies to put forth to it. But we want you to know that we are out there and we stand ready to address these things, and we're trying to get ahead of things before they happen, before unfortunate incidents like in other places have happened. We're trying to get ahead of them, and I can tell you, our partners are doing a good job in working with our assistant U.S. attorneys in investigating and keeping a watchful eye on groups and individuals that may be doing, maybe up to wrongdoing.
I've gotten a couple questions from people here at the meeting wanting to talk about your engagement at the local crime level, and I know there's been lots of talk about whether it's like criminal justice coordinating council and with the mayor's office, or just collaborating with state and local officials to tackle gang violence, not just in Baltimore City. Like, quite frankly, we know gang violence isn't limited to the city. It's in all of our jurisdictions around the area. Right. What's the kind of collaboration you're doing, and where do you hope to get eventually with that collaboration as you get more settled into the job?
So, the office, even before I got here, has been, day in and day out, we're in constant communication with our state and local partners. I like to think coming into the job with a lot of built-in relationships already, that has been a seamless transition, and that we're doubling down on that. One area I just this morning came from we have a strike force, which is, really specifically about addressing organized crime, gangs, and neighborhood groups throughout the state that are responsible for, an outsized portion of the violence. That strike force is literally a co-located large task force that includes your Baltimore City Police Department, your Baltimore County, but also your ATS, your FBI, your U.S. Marshals, your state police. Everybody, name the law enforcement organization, they're all co-located in a building, working together to solve violent crime problems. So we're pushing to add more resources to that initiative. I'm looking to add more attorneys to our office's violent crime section. We are looking as an office, we're looking at how to enhance our Project Safe Neighborhoods, which is kind of our signature violent crime initiative. And as part of Project Safe Neighborhoods, we're looking to see in what areas we can take more gun cases to prevent more, prevent violent crime. In one of those areas, we're looking at school zones, which is traditionally an area that the office hasn't done much prosecution for, but we think may be a way to send a message while also taking more cases of repeat violent offenders who are carrying weapons. So that collaboration is increasing. I'm pushing in DC to with our federal partners to bring more resources, to bring more attorneys and more agents to help our local police departments. I'm optimistic that we're going to see some traction in the area. But Maryland is in Baltimore City, and Maryland is unfortunately no different than what's going on nationally. Violent crime is up nationally, but I am optimistic that we are putting things in place to mitigate the violence and get some traction on reducing violent crime in our neighborhoods.
Well, I want to say thank you again for honoring us by joining us tonight for our Advocacy Day and sharing your commitment, your office's commitment to helping us collectively fight against crime and fight against public corruption and fight against hate. It's all so important, and the partnership that we have with our federal law enforcement officials, your office, the FBI, Homeland Security are just so critical, whether it's responding to an urgent incident or the deeper concerns we all have for safety and security. So thank you again for joining us. And on behalf of Howard County, DC, and Baltimore, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Reminder to everyone on the Zoom, if you haven't yet signed up for any of your local lobbying nights, there's one more evening. There's more evenings left. Please go to the websites of any of our three organizations and sign up to meet with your legislators. As you heard from the Senate President, our meetings really make a difference. Your advocacy really makes a difference. So please, and next year, knock on wood, we hope to be back in Annapolis. I know we said this at the end of last year's Advocacy Night too. But I'm really hoping that as the Senate comes back in person, maybe next year we'll all be able to be back in person. We can see everyone together, and do in-office visits and have in-person speakers as we welcome a new legislature to Annapolis in 2023. In the meantime, we want to urge all of you to stay safe, and good night, and thank you again for joining us.